Okay, my friends, my greatest hero in history is Immanuel Velikovsky, and we're going to discuss him today and his research that he did and the books that he wrote and my evidence that supports precisely what he said. Let's get started. Okay, my friends, this is a history lesson you probably never heard of. Now, Velikovsky was a friend of Albert Einstein, and he did research worldwide and was destroyed by academia for doing this research because it showed that there was a worldwide cataclysm not long ago, and he went to every culture on the face of the planet and got their information. Libraries, museums, carvings, scrolls, tablets, cultural centers, the whole 9 yards, from every different diverse population that was on Earth. All the islands, all of the up in the North and down in the Aztecs and the Mayans and everybody, all over Asia, everywhere. And they all had the same story about giants and about a terrible worldwide catastrophe that didn't happen that long ago. And he was destroyed. I mean, literally destroyed. And we're going to see a movie, well, a documentary that was done about him in 1964. He wrote the book in 1950. Completely destroyed. All of his predictions came true, but he was still destroyed. And I will show you the documentary about it, and it was a tragedy. And when I was started to understand mud fossils, I realized that there was no interest in reality in academia, none whatsoever. Couldn't care less about if it was real or not. It's all about peer review and what your friends will say about you if you come up with new things. And he did, and he was destroyed. The only friend he maintained was Einstein. Einstein was with him to the very end, and he died, that is Einstein, with Velikovsky's book open on his bed when he died. Velikovsky was no fool, and he was destroyed, and you're going to see the evidence. And I wrote a book about him. Here's the book I wrote, Mudfossils and Velikovsky and Minds in Collision. He wrote Worlds in Collision, which was the documented history of the world. They said we almost got impacted by a fiery comet, which came literally from Jupiter. It was born from the feared god Jupiter. This is what freaked them all out. They just could not accept this. It sounded crazy, and it does sound crazy, but I have discovered it's literally all true. And now with Google Earth and all of the tools that I had to work with, I can prove Velikovsky was right, and I have. Now we're going to see what they did to him, and then we'll go from there. All right, we're just going to get right into it because there was a documentary done on TV about his deplorable treatment. And Velikovsky was a researcher. He went to everywhere in the world. He was a good friend of Albert Einstein's, and he was criticized by all. This guy was as nasty as could possibly be. Sagan was just as bad or worse. And Velikovsky was basically destroyed for his work, and it's called the Velikovsky Affair. And let's get right into it. Carl Sagan was the nastiest person you could ever imagine, and of course he was all celebrated for being, I'm smiley and I'm so smart. Albert Einstein was Velikovsky's friend, and he died with Velikovsky's book open on his bed. Asimov was a critic of Velikovsky. They all beat up on him. And they came down on him. They pulled his book off the bookshelves after 11 weeks of #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. #1. 11 weeks in a row, they forced him to take it off because it criticized the idiots that were running science. And they're still the same idiots who are running science today. It's a disaster. It really is. Okay, this is Immanuel Velikovsky. This is from Electric Universe Eyes. We're using the Fair Use Act, just showing what they had to say. And this is from a video documentary in 1964. That's 14 years after he wrote Worlds in Collision. So let's see what they have to say, and I'm just going to let it play, and we'll see how they treated Velikovsky.
In 1950, an amazingly unconventional thinker astounded the scientific community with a theory that challenged many of its most deeply rooted assumptions. In a persuasive bestseller, this man presented a radical view of world history that linked research and hypotheses in such diverse disciplines as astronomy, geology, comparative religion, and archaeology. A storm of protest arose from every corner of the academic world, claiming that the theory was totally wrong. This opposition soon turned into an attempt to suppress the book and discredit the man who wrote it. The man is Immanuel Velikovsky, Russian-born doctor and psychoanalyst, student of the sciences and humanities, founder and one-time editor of the Scripta Universitatis series, out of which grew the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. For the last 25 years, Dr. Velikovsky has been resident in the United States, where he has continued his studies and advanced his theories. His first book was titled Worlds in Collision, and that was followed by Ages in Chaos, Earth in Upheaval, and Oedipus and Akhenaten. Dr. Velikovsky's contention is that in the memory of man, the Earth has gone through great natural paroxysms. He's founded his theory on the ancient records of man from all over the world, on archaeological evidence in the form of ancient calendars that have become strangely obsolete, and on new and radical interpretations of information from astronomy, paleontology, paleomagnetism, and evolution. In addition, Dr. Velikovsky's theory has led him to re-examine prevailing views regarding the origins of religion, as well as those which form the basis of celestial mechanics. And he also calls for a realignment of the chronologies of ancient civilizations. Well, the result of this wide-sweeping theory, as I've said, was a flood of very harsh criticism and ridicule. The scientific community was almost unanimous in rejection of his work. Jacques Barzun, Dean of Graduate Faculties at Columbia University, wrote just recently that the merits of the scientific issue do not alter the deplorable treatment Dr. Velikovsky's ideas received from the profession. The prejudging scorn and closing of ranks against the heretic showed typical guild animus. In recent years, however, evidence collected during the geophysical year and by several space probes has tended to verify several of Velikovsky's predictions. For instance, he had said in the face of strong disagreement that because of her recent birth, Venus is extremely hot, a view subsequently borne out by observations of Mariner 2. He was accused of inventing an interplanetary magnetic field, but one has been detected since then by Pioneer 5. He claimed in 1950 that the ancient civilizations of Central America were much older than believed. Recently, this view, too, has been proved by radiocarbon dating. All in all, a score of Dr. Velikovsky's predictions have been verified, and the opposition within the scientific community has abated. New voices are being heard. For instance, that of Lloyd Motz, professor of astronomy at Columbia University, who, while he still disagrees with Velikovsky, says his predictions should be recognized and his writings should be carefully studied and analyzed because they are the product of an extraordinary and brilliant mind and are based on some of the most concentrated and penetrating scholarship and research of our period. Here with us today on Camera 3 to discuss his theories with Dr. Velikovsky in his first television appearance is Eric Larrabee, an editor and writer whose articles about Dr. Velikovsky were the earliest attempts to make him familiar to a wider audience, and whose latest piece in Harper's Magazine has directed attention to a re-examination of the Velikovsky theories.
Dr. Velikovsky, it's almost 15 years now since you first published Worlds in Collision, and in the years since you've published 3 other books, Volume 1 of Ages in Chaos, Earth in Upheaval, Oedipus and Akhenaten. And during this period, there has been the curious paradox that although the scientific academic community hasn't by any means accepted what you have to say, that fortune has smiled on you in many respects, in the sense that science itself, point by point, has gone somewhat more in your direction. And also recently that one observes the phenomenon of the younger generation in the colleges and universities being more receptive to new ideas than the older. I was reminded of a quote of Max Planck's, which you know as well, that in new ideas in science don't actually become accepted. What happens is that the proponents of the older ideas die off and are replaced. When you look at some of the things that have happened, some of the ways in which science has come your way, so to speak, and this much larger interest, much greater willingness to talk about your ideas in the colleges, how do you feel looking back on it? Which of the developments jump out to you the most? I remember you were saying once that you had never dreamed when you first were thinking what you should write about the planet Venus, that in your lifetime you would see something like the space probe Mariner, which successfully went within 20,000 miles of that faraway planet. I know that stands out to you as one of the events of this time. What in particular led you to be so concerned with what Mariner would find on Venus? With in particular the question of Venus's heat. Well,
you know, Mr. Larby, that Venus is persona dramatis of my first book. In that book, I claim that there were terrestrial catastrophes caused by extraterrestrial agents in prehistoric and also historical times. And I tried to identify the agent. Well, Venus, the story of Venus as a protoplanet, occupies large part of the book. However, in the beginning of the book, for about 150 pages, I describe the events that were observed and left memory of them in so many historical and also folkloristic documents of all civilizations
and records.
Yes, and records.
Let me just cut in here for 1 second. Velikovsky went to literally every culture on the face of the earth, and he went to the libraries, to the museums, cultural centers, all of the historical evidence, carvings, tablets, scrolls, everything, papyrus. And not only in the Middle East, he went to Asia, he went to up in the North countries, he went to South America, he went everywhere. And they all had a very, very similar story, an event that happened not long ago. And he will explain as we go along. Now, they're talking about Mariner, the probe. What happened was he claimed Venus was extremely hot. And everybody said, oh, no, that's not true. It's going to be the same temperature as Earth, basically. Well, it ends up to be over 800 degrees. He was right about everything he said. And now with my evidence and Google Earth and all that stuff, and the Mudfossils and the DNA tests and the CAT scans and all that stuff, it's 100% certain that there was giants on the Earth, there was dragons, there was all the things that were written about. And one of the other things that was written about is a gigantic worldwide flood to eliminate the Earth of those problems, the giants and the dragons. And this planet, Venus, which we call it now, was described in those days as a fiery comet born from the feared god Jupiter, which is a planet, and he was also the god called Zeus. This is the mythology that is now going to be fully understood as truth and reality. It's shocking, it's spectacular, it's thrilling, it's scary as hell, but it is what it is. And what happened to him happened exactly to me, because I brought out all these truths that were crushed by academia, literally crushed. And I am in a place right now where I am basically blocked from the rest of the world. And he was too. He was top of the line, and then he ended up speaking to half a dozen people at a time. And by the time I wrote my book, I couldn't find anybody that even knew who he was. The only ones I found that knew who he was were people that were as nasty as could be. Oh, that idiot. Can you imagine the things he was saying? I remember reading, they destroyed him. Carl Sagan took him to the cleaners. They destroyed that guy. Yes, they did. It's exactly what happened. They destroyed him. And his evidence now has proven to be undeniable. Undeniable. And I have DNA tests and CAT scans and specimens. I have shown over and over that these things that they spoke about in the ancient past were not just idle tales told to scare little children to being good. No. These were the most craziest things that ever happened, and they just happened to be true. And nobody else has any other explanation for the universe and the solar system and life itself and any of that stuff. They have no explanation for that whatsoever. So they stick to the age of enlightenment, where we decided all those people were crazy. Let's be enlightened and listen to the academics and have everybody agree that those people were crazy. Now, there's other things written that would happen. So the things that they were talking about, the mythology, is not only true, but the things that they predicted that would happen have happened. And they are coming true at this very moment. So let's get back to Immanuel Velikovsky. I just want to throw that in. Everything that he said has been supported completely. 100% of what he said has been supported. There's never been a culture on the face of this planet that has denied, every culture wrote about giants and dragons, 100%. Not one single culture did not. The only culture that doesn't have that in it is academia. And academia, my friends, is a worldwide culture. And as far as I'm concerned, they are destroying humanity. So who's in charge of that? So you better start reading up about the ancient myths, my friends. All right, here we're back to the destruction of the world's greatest hero. All right, so I just backed up a smidge. He said the most dramatic thing in his first book was the Venus impact into our atmosphere on Earth. And when you read these books, he's got details that are astounding.
Book, I claim that there were terrestrial catastrophes caused by extraterrestrial agents in prehistoric and also historical times. And I tried to identify the agent. Well, Venus, the story of Venus as a protoplanet, occupies large part of the book. However, in the beginning of the book, for about 150 pages, I describe the events that were observed and left memory of them in so many historical and also folkloristic documents of all civilizations
and records.
Yes, and records. Now you understand well that I had no personal means to send a marine probe. And so my hope and my prayer was that I should still have the chance in my lifetime, not only myself, but my opponents. I wish them long life, that they should be also witnesses of that probe, which now 2 years ago, I believe it was August of 1962, was launched, and by December 14, I think it was 14,
passed by
the date point.
Well, if I may be a devil's advocate just momentarily, I know what many of your critics have said is that a prediction like this is a matter of chance, and that they imply that you are pulling things out of the air. Well, obviously, you could have said a great many other things about Venus. You could have said Venus has 2 moons, or is made out of cottage cheese, or something other than saying that it is hot. What led you in particular to say quite contrary to the belief of the time? that Venus was a hot planet.
Well, first I will say what I said. At the end of my book, in the very last two sections, before the section, the end, I put two claims. So the position which I selected for them in my book by itself proves the importance I gave to them. These were, first, Venus must be very hot.
Must be hot.
Must be very hot, is very hot. I called the chapter Thermal Balance of Venus. And I said, Venus gives off heat. Not as usually supposed to be. A planet gets so much heat from the sun and reflects so much heat in the space. It gives its own heat. Of course, if it is a body like other bodies in the solar system of 6 billion years or longer, older, of course, you wouldn't expect that it would give off heat. Now I said also that it was observed by contemporaries of those events and after as an incandescent body. At the same time, still in 1959, it was calculated and accepted that the surface temperature of Venus is 17 degrees Celsius, only about 3 degrees above the temperature of the Earth.
It's very similar to ours.
Now, even so-called ashen light, which is shimmering off some light from the shadowed side of Venus, Venus between the Earth and the Sun has, like moon, a shadowed side, was explained by a cover of ice. Well, of course, you understand that there could be no ice as a temperature in which lead is molten.
Yeah.
Let me just explain. It might have sounded a little confusing. The surface of Venus is now known, and he predicted this at that time, in contrary to everybody else. The surface of Venus can melt lead. It's that hot. Instead, the experts in 1959 were still talking about an ice-covered globe or whatever they wanted to do. They just could not accept the fact that it was hot until Mariner went there. So listen to this.
Mariner, already in 1961, it was found that by radio signals arriving from Venus that it is very hot, actually 600 Fahrenheit.
And your reason for believing this was that your theory required that it be a new planet, a young planet in geological astronomical time.
Yes, it was the cause of the natal heat, but also the result of the short but very stormy history of this body.
Which is what you described in your book.
Which I described, actually not theorized as much as tried to reconstruct from ancient sources from so many civilizations.
Well, the reason that the objection that the scientific community has lavished on you, I assume, is that it is quite basic to a number of different sciences, that the life of the solar system has been uneventful, regular, in the terms in which we exactly as we see it now, for many, many hundreds of thousands of years.
Well, until very recently, this was the accepted view that the solar system is almost in a static state for, it was, when I started my book, it was said 2 billion. By now it is already 9 billion years. But recently, it has become, it all changed. So many things were discovered, and one of them is the heat of Venus. And let me also say that 600 degree of 1959 was one of the reasons to send the Mariner probe to find that it is not so. I remember in December of that year 62, when Mariner probe was still on, just past the date point, but there was not yet the final report. I heard a man scientist from Jet Propulsion Lab who, speaking before the AAA convention in Philadelphia, expressed his hope that it will be found the temperature much lower. What was found, it was still higher, not 600 but 800 degrees.
Well, there was another finding of Mariner, which has just in this past week been still further confirmed, which is the question of Venus's motion. The recent confirmation of the retrograde motion is even more puzzling, is it not, and even more embarrassing.
Okay, I'm going to explain that in a second, but basically the same thing happened to me that happened to Velikovsky, or, well, we'll find out shortly. I made a prediction that Comet Bennu, or asteroid Bennu, is a heart, literally a heart in space. They just took a sample of it, brought it back to Earth, and it's here on Earth, and they just opened up the capsule. And my prediction and my claim is that it will be blood. It will be literally identical to blood. All right, I've shown this very clearly. It's a heart. And I'm going to be showing all this stuff over and over and over again. But the same thing happened to me that happened to him. Everything that I have presented has been dismissed and denied, even though I have DNA tests and CAT scans and specimens and everything else. And it all supports Velikovsky, and it all supports these ancient stories that we're told. Even like the retrograde of Venus, I can explain that. And it was said in these ancient texts that Venus was born from the feared god Jupiter. And I can also show you that that is literally true, because Jupiter's red spot is not just a big red spot. All right, it's a birth canal. All right, so here we go back to him explaining the retrograde and the temperature and so forth.
Found the temperature much lower. What was found, it was still higher, not 600 but 800 degrees.
Well, there was another finding of Mariner, which has just in this past week been still further confirmed, which is the question of Venus's motion. The recent confirmation of the retrograde motion is even more puzzling, is it not, and even more embarrassing to the conventional Orthodox view. Yes. I see it's not embarrassing to your point of view.
No, not at all. Not
you were more comfortable with it.
Not at all. I would say that the Mariner probe surpassed all my wildest dreams. It found first, I would say, confirmed the find made before that by Pioneer 5, that the space, interplanetary space, is magnetic. Well, I was a target of much ridicule exactly because of the...
When he says it's magnetic, I can show you the fields in space that are stunning, and I think I will do it right now just to prove my point. All right, these are the kind of fields that are in space. They're everywhere. The space is saturated with these magnetic fields, which impede light. Dipole electron flood theory explains the whole thing about light and how it's made of dipoles and how light slows down. It's not the universe just pulling the light away so it shifts to the red. It's slowing down. And the cosmic microwave radiation background is nothing more than light that is slowed down so slow it's just not going anywhere anymore. It just fills the universe with these particles, and they blink on and off as they get banged into by other light coming at them. And these spinning planets and so forth in space create these huge magnetic fields. The moon doesn't spin. It doesn't have a field. That other field is coming from, I believe it's Jupiter, Venus maybe. I'm not sure. But these are all fields that saturate space. Look at this. And I think this might even be Pleiades. All right, do you see there's like seven things going around here, and that's the moon. I don't know how. Dylan Carpenter sent me these. He's Rod Warren's nephew. He's over in New Zealand, and that's as much information as I got from him. He sent, and I haven't had any more contact with him. But you can see that's just very, very interesting. And everything, this is all dipoles, and there's 7 things going around here. Now here's another shot of one. Here it is right here. Now this one here is a little bit different, but it looks like the moon is behind this. I'm having a hard time trying to understand all these different shots I get from people. I get so much stuff, and I spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, and some of it is very hard to figure out. But these are the fields that are in space. And they're still looking for these. Look at this. They're putting out these kind of things like, well, we're really looking, and this is an artist's conception. I'm showing you the actual pictures, but they actually show the dipoles. You see the black one and the white one? They understand now, and they're sort of nibbling around the edges about dipole electron flood theory. Because this dipole electron flood theory works. It works perfectly, absolutely flawlessly. So that's that. Now let me show you something about Venus. I'm sorry, Jupiter, the red spot. All right, as Velikovsky said, there is documented historical statements that say that Venus, the fiery comet, then they didn't call it Venus, I don't think, but they said there was a fiery comet born from the feared god Jupiter. And it came down and it almost hit Earth. It combusted our atmosphere, boiled the waters because it was so hot, 800 degrees or more, and impacting with our atmosphere caused all the turbulence and the Great Flood. And all of the giants and the dragons and everything drowned. And they are here on Earth. I have them. I have DNA tested and CAT scans, the whole 9 yards. And I'm going to tell you what else. This is literally a birth canal. This is Earth, basically the same size as Venus. Now, what happens here? This is a mound. It's not a storm. As the planet rotates this way, this mound has to plow through these gases, and instead of what happens is the gases go around it and start to swirl over here. This isn't the thing that's swirling. The gases hit the mound and swirl. Any good scientist should certainly be able to understand that's basically an impact zone into this gases, and they come and they swirl around. I mean, it's quite obviously. I believe they call those eddy currents. So now this shows the size we're dealing with, and that we have what they call the Venus mons. That's the mound on Jupiter. All right, this is what it would look like if Jupiter gave birth to a planet the size of Earth or Venus. This is what it would look like. Now, if you don't want to see any planet porn, I would click off for a second because I am going to show you what this giant red spot is, and it is what creates birth. So if you don't want to see this, click off, because the next thing you're going to see is what this birth canal is, and it's a vagina. So here we go. Now this is the great red spot, and they say, oh, it's a big swirling storm. It is not. That is a vagina. All right, and this right here is and of course it's a little bit distorted because it's being pushed against continuously. But this is the clitoris area. This is the actual birth canal, and these are the vaginal ripples. And this is literally the hairline coming right up here. I'm telling you, this is just unbelievable, but it is true. And this was a close flyby. This is an actual picture. Now, this is, again, there's the labia minor and majora, I believe. There's different, well, you'll see it in a second. But this is what got me. This is no question. You see what that is right there? That's a tag. And that's what holds this body part in position. You see the little neck to it, and it's just a ball that locks this in, so it won't go floating around. That's what it is. Every body part in you has a tag on. I call that the spur lock. You see how it's got an angle coming out, and then it locks in. They come out with an angle, and then they drop in and snap in, and that's what holds it. And it also, I believe, these are the two interstitial spots that let the fluid through. I have the same stuff. It's unbelievable, but it's true. All right, and that's, I'm going to show you, the next shot I'm going to show you is a human woman's vagina. So, like I say, if you're not into that, well, you better click off. Here goes. All right, so I said that tag, this is the same sort of thing. When any body part tags into another body part, it locks in with a spur lock, a little latch, and that's that latch I just showed you. It came up like this, and then it had a little snap ball that locked in. This is the same thing here. This is a piece of meat, but it's actually a rock, but that's the lock right there. That's the latch. All right, and the tag, there's like a ball that locks it right in there. This is ripped, so this is like an injury, but this is, the fluids run from one fascia to the next. Just like this one here. There's a couple little spots in the bottom where the fluids run to attach. This is a fluid-filled highway. This is all pretty new stuff. And that's actually a rock, but it sure looks like a piece of meat. Now, so this is the latch that I'm going to show you. Well, I did show you, but let's take a look at it in the actual human anatomy. All right, so once again, there it is right down at the bottom. That's exactly what I just showed you a second ago in those two shots. And here's what it looks like. Get ready, here it comes. Boom. There it is right there. That's it. The latch comes up, and that's the latch. And the rest is just what it is. I mean, it's exactly identical. There is no difference whatsoever. Here's that little bump at the top, the clitoris and all that stuff, and you got the labia minora and the anyway, it's pretty obvious what you got here. I'm not going to, labia majora. So there's different layers of tissues, and then you get to it's what it is. And that is that lock. All right, so let's go back to Velikovsky. I'm telling you, this is just off the charts, but it's exactly what was written. This fiery comet was born from the feared god Jupiter. And if you read Ovid, O-V-I-D, in Metamorphosis, he says exactly the same thing. These gods, which were planets, and all kinds of other crazy things, they could change their sexes. They could change them to become immortal looking people. They're all gods, look really buff, hot looking guys, would come down and have sex with all the human women. And they could change themselves into anything they want, mushrooms and trees or plants or rivers or anything, because they controlled matter, it appears to me. And Zeus was the feared god Jupiter. Or Jupiter was the feared god Zeus. And Zeus was the one that set up shop on Mount Olympus and had his sex parties there. And this was all written about in the past, too. They came down and they had sex with the human women. They gave birth to giants and all kinds of crazy monsters. And then they had to wipe it off the face of the earth, all that nasty stuff. And that's when Jupiter dispatched Venus, gave birth to Venus to go wipe out Earth, and it did. All of those nasty, big, gigantic things died, virtually 100%. And they're all over the Earth. I've shown them over and over and over and over and over. There's not a question about it now. And my giants are pretty good size. I have one that has a 3-foot-long finger tip. Just the tip of the finger is 3 foot long. And it has the fingerprints, and it's been DNA tested. So let's get back to this. All of the things that were written in the past, as far as I'm concerned now, have to be re-evaluated, because as far as I'm concerned, they were true. So here goes again. Electric Universe Eyes put this up, and I'm just, he used the 64 interview and as a fair use, and I'm just using it again as a fair use. Here goes.
Things that I invented for others that do not exist in the solar system, because I needed them to explain all this.
Well, let me come back a minute or two here so we can come back to this.
Just in this past week, been still further confirmed, which is the question of Venus's motion. The recent confirmation of the retrograde motion is even more puzzling, is it not, and even more embarrassing to the conventional Orthodox view. Yes. I see it's not embarrassing to your point of view.
No, not at all. Not at
you are
all.
more comfortable with it.
Not at all. I would say that the Marine probe surpassed all my wildest dreams. It found first, I would say, confirmed the find made before that by Pioneer 5, that the space, interplanetary space, is magnetic. Well, I was a target of much ridicule exactly because of this, that I invented forces that do not exist in the solar system, because I needed them to explain all these unusual events that took place in the sky, events that the Greek called theomachy, the battle of the gods.
I remember you saying one time that one description of your work might be to replace René Descartes back in the position he deserves in 17th century science. I believe you meant by this his theory of the tourbillon and the vortices as opposed to a Newtonian universe.
Yes, at least to put him back into position of a rightful contender of Newtonian theory, because very recently, actually a year before my book was published, in a book of philosopher Butterfield, I saw the sentence, in that great debate or contest, Descartes was the loser, because these worlds, these vortices that he described, these particles of matter, of ether that fill the universe, they are not there. Nobody found them, nobody discovered them. So it was an empty universe in which the celestial bodies in complete peace and eventfully travel for eons.
All right, do you understand what he just said? The universe is saturated with particles, which I just showed you in all that magnetic field stuff. And that is light. Light is particles. So let's let him just continue. So he's on the same page with me there. We got a couple things that we're a little bit at odds about, but 99% of what he's saying, he was correct. And you see things talking about battles in the sky and the gods, he sort of nibbled into that area pretty deep. And that's what killed him. That's what killed me too. And the actual fact of the matter is, they kept a lot of that stuff out of the Bible because it was too much for people to handle. So, well, in the beginning it just happened and all have a nice day. No, there was a lot of details that are just not told. So here he goes.
And the universe we see now is not that kind of place.
Not at all. But then again, Mariner found not only this, it found, of course, this heat. And there is no explanation for this heat. Would be after it was already found, there would be some explanation for it. The best it was done by Kuiper on assumptions that there is water vapors and carbon dioxide when it was thought 600. The best it could do with on this optimal condition for greenhouse effect would be 170 Fahrenheit. But now for 800 degrees, there is no explanation at all. Actually, I have to ask you whether you know any astronomer who has offered any theory that was...
I know exactly why it's happening. Venus is spinning backwards. We're spinning forwards, like rolling down a street, like a tire rolling down a road, through all these particles in space, this ether that he's talking about, saturated particles in space. So if you're rolling down that road correctly, you're not going to heat up too much. But if you're going backwards and still have to go down that road, your tires are going backwards. You're going to be 800 degrees. You're going to be smoking your tires like crazy. That's what's happening with Venus. It has to plow through everything in front. We're just rolling down the stuff that's in front of us just like a tire. They're going backwards, but still going forwards. That's why the heat is. So there's my explanation.
Acceptable to the next astronomer.
I think part of their reaction, again, if I may be the devil's advocate, is that the astronomers, although they may not have explanations for the puzzles that you forcefully put to their attention, the astronomers object, at least many of them objected at the time, because they thought evidence was being brought to their field from, to their minds, extraneous fields such as history, archaeology, and the like. They have not been willing, at least in recent time, to accept that sort of evidence as binding on questions of astronomy. I wonder sometimes when you think that your first book was the one largely given over to this question of the human record, what men said happened, and this involved a use of the past human material in an unusual, surprising way. What do you think would have happened if you had brought your other evidence first? If you had talked first about geology? If you had published Earth in Upheaval, which has a completely different kind of evidence in it? Do you think they would have been more receptive?
I would not know. Many people affirm this, that would have I started with geological and paleontological evidence, I would have probably not met the same stormy opposition. But, and I understand, of course, that for astronomer to change his basic views on what he believes are mythology, old wives' tales, biblical story, you know, the Bible is a book that we are asked to swear in it, but we are asked also not to believe into it. And at least, well, you know, of course, that I am not a fundamentalist and didn't try in any way to prove the Bible right. But on the other hand, it happened to me to go even further than fundamentalists go, because on the Bible, and actually in so many places, in Psalms, in Prophets, in Mosaic books, spoken about mountains that melt like wax, that the sea erupt, and other things, that the fundamentalists would believe that these are metaphors. But I found that the same sentence, the same description are plentifully
there is
available in Mexican and Chinese.
He's talking about the same stories that were written in the Bible and all stuff. Everybody else had them everywhere. Every other country, every other culture had the same stories about mountains melting like wax because of the heat coming down. And then it actually basically combusted with our atmosphere, burnt everything up, forced a compression of all the oxygen and hydrogen together, which creates water. Normally, if it's in a gas form, if you crush it together, it turns into H2O, which is water, but it would be boiling coming down, and the oceans were literally boiling. I don't know if the oceans were, but the rivers and lakes and all that. And the only people that survived, as far as I can determine, were the people that got way, way, way up on the top of the mountains inside of caves and didn't get as seriously flooded. I don't know. Very few made it. And nothing large survived. And that was a whole plan for Venus to wipe out everything large, and it did. All right, so let's just make sure you understand this. There's a couple, I want to make sure these points don't get missed. He's saying that everywhere in all of these Bible passages, but in addition, like you read Mythology, read Ovid, read Hesiod, all right, Apollodorus, read Apollodorus, it'll blow your mind. And these were BC writers. These are not current writers. These were ones that were very close to the source. So here goes. Spoken
about mountains that melt like wax, that the sea erupt, and other things, that the fundamentalists would believe that these are metaphors. But I found that the same sentence, the same description are plentifully available in Mexican, in Chinese, in Hindu, in all that. And I didn't give any preference to the Bible.
Exactly. I think this may have been one of the elements that confused the argument these 14, 15 years ago. The fact that it sounded like a fundamentalist argument, the fact that they didn't notice that you were drawing also on evidence from peoples all over the earth, from the ancient legends and records of all peoples, and the fact also that
This would not have been not noticed by those who read the book.
well, I sometimes wonder, and I'm not. When you see some of the things that have been said about the book, you are sometimes led to doubt that they should have been
Some
more
of my
careful.
objectors who thought that they can gain by this the sympathy of religious people accuse me that I give or gave the same valence to biblical description as to some mythology or some legend, folklore of primitive peoples or peoples in pagan religion.
Well, there is another point involved here, which is that when the argument over catastrophism went on in the 19th century, there were still many people who took a catastrophist or semi-catastrophist kind of view, who did so for a mixture of theological reasons and bound themselves to the theology of that time. So that the idea has often been associated with a sort of semi-fundamentalist point of view. And the fact that you come to stories which appear to be, in quotes, miraculous, and offer not a miraculous explanation, but a natural scientific explanation, is not quite easily assimilated by readers who have always put it in the other context.
Well, don't forget also that by now it's 100 years since Darwin achieved his victory over the book of Genesis. Now it is a little bit difficult to go back and to say, well, the story is not exactly so. We have the phenomena from all places, from the bottom of the sea with ash and with nickel, which is of meteoric origin, and the ash that covers all the bottom of the ocean. And you know, geologists today claim, like Professor Ewing of Columbia University, that it was an encounter with a terrific comet that spread this ash all over the world, and now it's found evenly spread on the bottom of the oceans. And you have now the accepted view, which was not accepted only 10 or 5 years ago, that the terrestrial axis moved.
All right, now you also have this accepted view now that mud fossils are real. Yale University has confirmed them, and only they say that they were all soft tissue before any bones and teeth or any of that stuff existed. And my mud fossils are all soft tissue. They are not. They have just transitioned completely because of the conditions that they were in. This hot water, very serious flood. And they say all that stuff did happen, but they say it happened 550 million years ago, before there was any animals really on Earth. It was just all like jellyfish. No, totally wrong. And I have mine are DNA tested. Some bits and pieces are CAT scanned, and they are what they are, and mine were giant. And you know, when he's talking about fundamentalism, the first words out of Yale, Derek Briggs, when I presented all my information to him, is that I said, some of these that I have are giants. And basically the first words out of his mouth, as I recall, was, what are you, some kind of creationist? And the same thing happened to Mary Schweitzer and Mark Armitage and a whole slew of them. They got fired. They got demoted. They got destroyed. Their careers were in serious jeopardy because of making these statements. Now, I don't have a career in this, so I don't really have all that much to risk. I just want the truth. And I have found everything that supports him. The mud fossils now are one of the most supportive things that can have. Now let's go back and see. He's talking about all of this ash, because everything burnt on the face of the earth, basically. This was an impact of, like, say, 100 trillion atomic bombs. This is a planet-to-planet impact. All a bomb is a really hard smack of a bunch of material in and out of each other, and it just goes into a big bomb. Well, just think of getting hit by a planet. It's like trillions of times more than an atomic bomb. And there would have been somewhere that would have been a pretty serious impact site on Earth, more or less, because it said the Earth stood still. It actually stood still, and he talks about that too. And in the ancient texts, they all said the same thing. It just going because it was being pushed against against Venus's reversed atmosphere. Now listen to this. Here he goes.
And with nickel, which is of meteoric origin, and the ash that covers all the bottom of the ocean. And you know, geologists today claim, like Professor Ewing of Columbia University, that it was an encounter with a terrific comet that spread this ash all over the world, and now it's found evenly spread on the bottom of the oceans. And you have now the accepted view, which was not accepted only 10 or 5 years ago, that the terrestrial axis moved, and that paleomagnetism proves that terrestrial axis, that magnetic axis, and possibly like Runcan and other of Manchester, claim that the Earth turned over. We know now from observation of Professor Danjon, director of Paris Observatory, that flares on the sun may influence the speed of rotation of the Earth, and there were sudden changes. Only very recently we read even that Jupiter was subjected to strong changes, and this also confirmed one of the latest of my
points you had made.
Yeah.
Isn't it strikingly true that the scientists who are willing to talk about these disturbances, about a change in the terrestrial axis, a change in the magnetic field of the Earth, that they are willing to talk about them provided they are put very far back in history? They are willing to talk about distortion of the Earth's crust, provided
this is a psychological problem. You see, we generally don't like to know that we are traveling on a accident-prone planet. You of course understand that I am not a prophet of doom, just the other way around. I believe that we are now, if the man himself will not be the cause of his destruction, we are now in a settled solar system for eons to come.
No, I don't agree.
But in the past, there were, in human memory, these very events that by reconstruction of which I could put all those claims, what you call predictions, that now, like Professor Barton, Professor Morse, and others writing to Science and others claim for me these predictions, an unusual prediction, because it was not thing that could be accepted, could be put into accepted scheme. Venus is hot. When it's calculated, only 17 and 100th degree hot. What? Venus is covered by hydrocarbons. You know, 4 years before the publication of my book, I approached the director of Harvard College Observatory asking that spectral analysis should be performed on Venus. And he directed me to Professor Adams, director of Mount Wilson Observatory in California, in Palomar, and to Professor Wilt, still alive, at Yale. And I put before them this my request, explaining that this is a crucial test. And understand, please, Venus is the last link in the theory. If there were catastrophes, and in historical times, and caused by extraterrestrial agent, and the agent was a protoplanet, Venus. And now I can say what Venus is like, that it is hot, that it is wrapped in a envelope of hydrocarbons. This I claimed
on the basis of the historical record.
Yes. And I asked this to be performed, and I got the answers. This was summer 46, 4 years before the publication of the book. There are no hydrocarbons on Venus in writing, and I was so firm in my belief that I did not blunder in the interpretation of historical sources that I put in my book. There must be an envelope of hydrocarbons. And then when in February 63, 2 months after the Mariner passing point, yes, then the report was given out, and it was hydrocarbons, dust and gases, exactly as I claimed it. The embarrassment.
The reason for that is because Venus was literally born just the way a body is born. And hydrocarbons are part of a creature's bodily compounds. And that's why when Venus almost hit Earth, Earth was covered with red blood. Read up, look into the catastrophes that happened. Blood fell, then stones fell in these chunks all over the Earth. The blood was the part of the birth process, the afterbirth. And the stones were from the umbilical cord. Extremely hard, rocky substances would fall. And then the manna that came after that, I believe, was part of the placenta, which would create these flaky little crackers, basically, that would fall at night as they condensed or whatever. They'd be cooked during the day and fall in the night, something like that. All of this stuff makes sense when you take this as a biology. And Venus was born from a vagina. I'm sorry, it's just what it was. And if it was born from a vagina, I would expect it to have blood, and it would have, which is the hydrocarbons and the red blood that fell all over the Earth, and the stones with the placenta. I mean, the umbilical cord. The placenta was the manna. All right, this is a paper I wrote back in 2016 about Jesus' chemistry. Is he as advertised? I was thinking Jesus might have been Venus. All right, and here's what it says. I did this video about it and so forth. What's the chemistry and what are the events? It is stated that milk pellets and red dust and stones fell during Exodus. All those things fell. Jesus states it was his literal body that fell to feed the refugees. He did say it somewhere, I am the bread that came down from heaven. All right. They were asking, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he say, I have come down from heaven? Stop grumbling among yourselves, Jesus replied. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I tell you, he who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. He said he came down from heaven. I am the bread that came down from heaven. All right. So I come down and I say, like everybody's saying that the Jews began to argue, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Well, placenta is milky gelatinous afterbirth, and it would rain down in pellets as dried milk from the impact and cook during the day and would come down at night. Red dust fell heavily, and afterbirth blood, which do that, is a dense red iron FeO2. Red dust, which is blood, fell everywhere. Stones fell, which is the umbilical cord, is just completely loaded with silicates. And it fell and shattered as stones. All these events happened at the same dates and recorded all around the entire world. 60 points Velikovsky made came true. All right, in the statement of Revelations 12 says God's Son was born in space. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant, cried out with birth. Another sign appeared, and there was a red dragon. All these things I'm saying are pretty much true. He swept a third of the stars out of the skies. That's 200 of the 600 angels. And God snatched the child up to his throne. All right, so you can come up and read this. It's on academia.edu. I have about 45 papers up here. I just put them up here because nobody will listen to me. I figure I'll just slap them up here and, and leave them up here. So this is the Jesus chemistry. All right, so don't forget, hydrocarbons are part of the birth process. And here's what he said. In writing, I was firm in my belief that he didn't make a mistake about the hydrocarbons. So here he goes.
In the interpretation of historical sources that I put in my book, there must be an envelope of hydrocarbons. And then when in February 63, 2 months after the Mariner passing point, yeah, then the report was given out, and it was hydrocarbons, dust and gases, exactly as I claimed it.
The embarrassment here for science is that you are seeking to unearth a natural fact by way of the humanistic evidence, which is to say you're bringing together a synthesis of different kinds of knowledge.
But let me say
an argument.
Let me ask you, what is the principle of uniformity? What does he say? Principle of uniformity on which is based the theory of evolution of Darwin. Our modern scientific thought is built on principle of uniformity, which crumbles by today. And what does it mean, this principle? Does it mean really that things that we do not observe today could not have happened years ago? What does it mean today? Today is this day in August?
But if you believe
it is not. If we don't see today, comets do not exist, comets. If we do not see since decades with an added eye that any nova, there are no novas.
That's exactly.
So where should
Camera 3 has appeared today at the endless fascination of the universe, and for permitting us to listen to their conversation on its challenge to the mind of man. Our thanks to Dr. Immanuel Velikovsky and Mr. Eric Lauer.
Yes, and my thanks to you all, my friends. And Velikovsky was not treated well. Okay, my friends, I have this book on Amazon. It's only 99 cents. You just get to read it. And I think they're giving it away free now if you have Amazon Prime or something, somebody told me. And I don't make any money on it, so it's whatever it is, it's up there. It's on Amazon. And this is Mudfossils and Velikovsky and Minds in Collision. He wrote Worlds in Collision, as you probably know now. And the people's minds cannot accept facts. So I'm going to call this One Small Step for Mankind, One Giant Leap for the Human Mind. I love you all. I hope you got something out of this. And it's time to move forward. You just can't be accepting what you've been taught. It's just not true. All right, love you all. Bye.